What's up YouTube, Scale Model Assassin. When I saw this kit from Minicraft lurking on a vendor table at a model show for just $10, I knew it would be rough, but it's an awesome plane, so I couldn't pass it up. I've got so much sprue glue and putty on this thing, I could have held it together without any liquid cement. My first modification was to drill out the air intake on the tail. Started with a micro drill and finished with a knife. I'm also adding holes on the fuselage for where the photo etch antennas and pitot tube will be mounted. Those drill bits break super easy, so make sure to buy a multi-pack. Looking at pictures of the engines, there's some different colored pieces of steel, so I mask and paint with my 1 and 2 millimeter tape. It's a good thing this kit has so few parts because none of them fit together the way I wanted them to. Everything seemed to need some sort of filler. The engine cowling didn't fit well, so I used Tamiya putty to smooth it out and then re-scribed the panel line using tape to help guide my razor saw and scriber. The decals are from Draw Decal, and I wanted to paint the blue stripe down the fuselage. I scanned and printed the decals so I could do things like this without messing them up. I didn't cut my final mask from the sheet freehand, but I used this as a general guide for where to place my straight-edged pieces of tape. No way could I freehand cut a straight line. In the end, I backmasked the blue line and painted the white and the gray above and below it. I test fit the paper scan of the decal, masked off the top section to be painted red, measured the straightness consistency with my new fancy calipers, and then proceeded to scratch the paint with their metal tips. I probably could have just used a ruler. I forgot to note my paint ratios, but this color is pretty close to the Japanese Hinumaros that I've painted in the past. Mostly red with a little bit of whole red mixed in. With all this masking, there was some overspray throughout. I didn't film it, but there was a good amount of touch-up work to make these lines pristine. After a gloss coat of aqua gloss and wet sanding, the surface is ready for decals. I trim these as close to the printed area as possible. At this point, I had a moment of panic. I made it this far in the build before I realized the unique bare metal sections on the wings of the MD-80. I stopped adding decals and did some heavy clear coats over the ones I needed to mask over. I also taped some paper down to cover the decals, so I didn't always have to put tape directly on them. The clear coat sealed them in well, and I had no issues. Then it was back to decaling. I finished them up with some more clear coats and wet sanding. This helps to level them out so the decal edges completely blend in with the surface and are invisible. Of course, if you do this too hard, you'll scratch off the decal ink, and that's no good. I did some light streaking on the wings and stabilizers with black oil paint. Focus on the panel lines and the gaps that are the movable surfaces. At first, I've overdone it and put way too much paint, but slowly I'll dull it down with thinner and cotton buds. It would have been difficult to paint and decal if I attached the engines earlier in the build. I saved them till last, which unfortunately meant fixing the enormous seam lines where they connected to the plane. The acrylic putty dries white, so I had to carefully airbrush once it was dried. Airbrushing anything other than a clear coat is not something I wanted to be doing this late in the build. These are the super small pitot tubes and indicators that I drilled the holes for earlier. The plane looked unfinished without lights, so of course I had to add them at the end. Why I did not plan this earlier, I don't know. Oh well, I sawed off the wingtips, made some lights from clear stretched sprue. You can form the sprue tips by rolling them into little balls while they're still warm. I painted them and glued them into place. The epoxy self-levels and forms to the contour of the wingtip and simulates the glass cover for the lights. A few antennas later, and I'm done. Northwest Airlines and the bowling shoe livery. I'd say the trickiest part of this one is lining up the three colors on the fuselage and getting the lines perfectly straight. It took me much longer to work on that than the video portrays. Anyways, I'll see you on the next build.